Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. On behalf of Alcock Marcus and SPS, we'd like to welcome you to our interactive expert discussion. Today, we will continue with our overarching theme of how to right-size your condominium fee, and today take a closer look at property values. Most importantly, how your property values are impacted by closing the gap and adjusting your monthly fees. I will introduce our panelists and get us started in just a moment, but before I do, I'd like to take care of some housekeeping items. All attendees have been added in listen-only mode, so you will be muted. We also ask that you take the extra step of ensuring your computer microphone is muted as well. We have about 30 minutes allotted to our panelists, and then we will open it up to hear what is on your mind in a live Q&A. Our ultimate goal for this session is to create a collaborative discussion. At any time, please feel free to click the button at the bottom of your screen that says Q&A and begin submitting questions you'd like our panelists to answer and discuss further. Lastly, the session is being recorded and we will share it with all of the attendees via email soon after it concludes. So today we are fortunate to have a number of experts with us to explore this topic of ensuring your community's plan to right-sizing fees incorporates what will happen to property values. Our first panelist is Jake Marcus. Jake is a partner with the law firm of Alcock and Marcus. His focus is representing condominiums and homeowners associations in Massachusetts and Florida. He provides associations with general representation and with litigation matters in state and federal courts. Next is Eric Churchill. Eric serves as the Executive Vice President at Schoenecker Property Services, or SPS. He plays a crucial role in working closely with clients and management teams to deliver exceptional value and long-term solutions for condominium communities. Eric firmly believes in a comprehensive and collaborative approach to planning. He understands the importance of working hand in hand with board members, property managers, and other professionals on behalf of communities and owners to ensure each community has an accurate, practical, realistic, and actionable plan that meets their specific needs. Most importantly, our spotlight speaker is Deborah Gardner. With over 40 years of experience in real estate, construction development, and client negotiation, Deborah is a highly respected industry leader and educator. She is one of only 2 Massachusetts National Broker Council representatives elected by the peers of the council. Deborah brings a depth of industry knowledge and community commitment to this prestigious role. Beyond real estate, she actively contributes to the local community as a member of the Sandwich, Massachusetts Housing Authority Grievance Committee and has served as a reconstruction president for the Sandwich, Massachusetts Boardwalk, where she has successfully organized and led a fully privately funded project overseeing the administrative, financial, and marketing aspects. We hope that everybody was able to either participate live or view the recordings for sessions we previously hosted on how to right-size your condominium fee. In each, we explored the factors that must be considered while determining monthly fees, how to calculate a right-sized fee, how to close the gap, and how to create and execute an actionable plan unique to your community. Condominium property values are a frequent topic of conversation, especially as they relate to increasing monthly fees. We'd like to kick off today with a poll question just to get a better understanding of who is in our audience today. So I will launch that now. And if everybody can do their best to answer, give everybody a little bit of time. So do higher monthly condominium fees cause lower property values? Okay, it looks, we're pretty close here, 82% participation, and we're really split down the middle between no, a higher fee equals higher values, and I'm unsure. About 40% each, and then 20% are saying yes, a higher fee equals lower values. So thank you all for participating. That really helps our panelists as we get into the discussion. And like I said, if you've already got some questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A now, and we'll make sure that we answer as many as possible. Okay, now I will hand it over to Jake.
Thank you, Shelby. And as Shelby mentioned, I am licensed to practice in Massachusetts and Florida. there have been huge developments in both areas that are important to discuss today. So we'll be discussing today about what goes into condominium fees and what goes into monthly common fees. And this basically ties directly into the maintenance, management, and overall operations of a condominium association. And just for background, part of a board member's fiduciary responsibility is to act in the best interests of the condominium association. And this is especially in regards to maintenance, repair, and replacement of the common elements. In turn, this entails that you maximize the property value of the condominium, which comes at an upfront cost to the unit owners related to the fees. So I'll briefly discuss having your ducks in a row, basically to ensure that the property value is not only maximized, but that the common fee for the condominium is addressing all of the required current and deferred maintenance. So in many instances during the pandemic, the market caused difficulties pertaining to conducting thorough inspections of the property, where buyers would basically not have a full picture of what the fee entails. But at this point, it's really important that both the buyer and seller side have an idea of all available information. And that makes sure that basically all the information is properly vetted. So on the buyer side, this would mean disclosing all information related to known material defects. On the seller side, you want to make sure that you're conducting not only an inspection of the interior, but also the outside. So this entails the common elements of the condominium association. In particular, inspections of the exterior structure are becoming more important. A lot of jurisdictions are requiring certain structural integrity and deferred maintenance, as well as certain milestone inspections. On the backdrop of this is basically the Champlain Towers collapse. And this was an unfortunate event that resulted in the death of 98 people. So jurisdictions are taking a lot more of a careful approach to looking into what goes into purchases and what goes into the structural integrity of properties. So other important areas that just need to be vetted in the purchase and sale are finances, insurance, are the amenities up to date, ongoing litigation or potential construction defects, just so you have an idea of what is in the common fee assessment as of now and what might be needed going forward. So those are kind of just a high area kind of review of what you need to look at from both the buy side and sell side. And it's a holistic approach. So you want to make sure you're addressing everything when you look at the common fee. So that's kind of the legal analysis of what we see.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Shelby. Welcome, everyone. My name is Eric Churchill from SPS. And I'm going to just briefly, before we move on to our spotlight speaker, I'm going to briefly share a few observations from our experience. From a technical perspective, what we see is that well-maintained communities the homes tend to sell for higher value. A well-maintained community is often associated with higher fees, so that the different, as Jake talked about, deferred maintenance, just visual repair, and or the need for capital reconstruction or capital restoration of the capital items, whether it's the roads, the amenities, or specific elements of the home. There's a cost to those, to keeping the community well maintained. That cost is often reflected in the fees, so the fees are higher, and there's a correlation between using your fees for maintaining your community and improving and or preserving your home value. The last technical piece that Jake touched on briefly is just the safety issue. And we're not going to put a price on safety, but the expectation of a buyer and the expectation of the market is that the board and the community are taking the steps to ensure that things like decks, foundational items, sewer related items are being attended to so that the community is safe. Obviously, there's a cost to that. And as I said, we're not going to put a price on safety, but higher fees associated with keeping things safe. From a financial perspective, if you just look at having a financial plan, and if there's a forecast that is specific to taking care of the maintenance, the repair, and the replacement of items so that buyers can see clearly that there's a plan in place, the finances are in place, or there is a plan to raise the money. What that does is it allows the buyer to have visibility into the future, comfort that there is stability in the plan, which again, from our experience, translates to higher prices. The last piece, and this is a topic that I think we'll probably get some questions on and hope to have more discussion on, is that when we think about the price of something, oftentimes we think of something that is, if it's more expensive, it's harder to sell. And I think in real estate, what's important to keep in mind is that homes throughout New England sell at all different levels. We have homes that may sell for $100,000 to $200,000. You may have bands of homes that sell for $500,000 to $800,000. You have bands of homes that sell for in the millions of dollars. All of those homes get bought and they get sold. The difference is they get bought and sold to different people who have different financial thresholds in terms of what they can afford. So what we try and, when we're working with communities, try and focus on, it's not whether or not they're going to have more difficulty selling it, or that you'll be able to sell it, or that it'll impact your value. A well-maintained community with higher fees may sell to a different person than a poorly maintained community with lower fees. But there's no correlation that it's harder to sell or not. So hopefully we'll have some more discussion on that, but I will turn this back over to Shelby, and Shelby's going to lead a discussion with our guest. So Shelby.
Thank you, Eric. Also, thank you, Jake. Just a reminder to everybody, if you have any questions on what Jake and Eric spoke about, go ahead and put them in the Q&A, and we'll start to organize them so we can answer them as quickly as possible. But for the real reason why you're here is likely because of Deb, our industry real estate expert. And from what I understand, Deb also has some personal experience with community restoration projects that led to higher monthly fees and high property values. So Deb, if you could just kick us off with your own personal story.
Well, I met SPS in an area close to the Cape, a waterfront community of condominiums, and they set up to do the exterior of the condominium that actually my son owned. And I got back from work that night, and it was a wow factor in regards to something being done, completed, cleaned up, and all of that. And so I got the information and how to contact them. And I personally own what I call my dream space in a condominium complex in Vermont. And I have owned it since 1998. And it was I never wanted to be on the board because I'm on many. However, after seeing what was explained earlier by Eric and Jake, there are responsibilities a board has to have in regards to maintaining these properties. We had special assessments, and I finally dug in and said, what are they for? I arrived there one day, and I know a lot about construction, and I saw in freezing cold weather, T111, which is a very flimsy cardboard product attached to the exterior leak area that I was aware of. And I said, that is not a fix. this is not going to work. And then I got heavily involved being on the board, introducing a pushback from most of the owners at the time. And we did know our property management that we had at the time also didn't really take an approach for the bigger items because of the age of the community. Now, many condominiums, the history of condominiums and when they were truly born, if you will, and developed in the New England area were in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and many of them are in difficult condition. When you buy real estate, you're looking at location, price, condition, and whether it's a single family home or a condominium, there are expenses that come with every improvement or any deferred maintenance on any. I just recently had another forum, and that forum was with all real estate folks throughout the country, with many scales of price points and many scales of what people are paying for and buying at this particular time. We went back into history to 2008. And in 2008, purchase prices were very, very low. The problem with the very, very low purchase prices is there was a lot of deferred maintenance on many of those single family properties. And continuing with the condominium, whether it's a single family or a condominium, that also occurred. And many people will say to me, oh my goodness, if we pay those kind of fees, we can't sell our property, Deb. And I have been the complex in which I own in. There was another one that was in deferred maintenance in my building that I was in. And location. And my daughter begged me not to buy it, and I should have. And she now will listen to me when she buys other properties currently. But teaching her along the way was not always easy. That property was sold in deferred purchase price of $98,000. We then contracted to have a full envelope in this community done and a full inspection done to know where this deferment was and deferred maintenance and what we needed to spend and kind of price that. And we were very successful with our community in doing that. Now, that same condominium for $98,000, less than 24 months later, sold for $650,000. I wish I bought it. So that's, when you talk about values and you talk about increasing the value of your home, condition is as important as location and price. Don't defer the maintenance.
Yeah, wow, Deb, just the sheer volume there, numbers wise, I'm sure that resonated deeply with our audience. Thank you for that story. Let's just go into some of these slides here, attempting to summarize what we feel this audience might already know. Don't necessarily need to read the words on the screen. You have them there, and you'll get a version of this recording so you can read later. But Deb, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. What questions should buyers ask when buying a home to ensure that they're enjoying worry-free living?
That's a very good question, Shelby. And it's not an easy question to answer at sometimes, but there are questions. One is always have a home inspection. Always ask for the documents from the management company that include the budget, past budgets, the larger scope of work that was done, and understanding in the future what that might be. Because many buyers, when they're looking at a property, are only seeing a fee. They're not seeing this special assessment fee. in many occasions. And of course, that's why I always refer to an attorney like Jake, to really look at those kinds of things in purchasing. And that's very, very important. So you can turn that key, walk in, and know what you're really buying. You're going to touch and feel and look at whatever inspection that you obtained, pay money for an inspection. And there are spaces in condominiums in which you can always access. You can also then ask for a further inspection for a professional electrician to go in, a plumber to go in, the heating system, the AC system. Those are all additional inspections you can do. Those are things that when a whole envelope has been done, it has looked at the whole entire exterior, and it's usually financed over a period of time. So it makes the condominium fee be very competitive in the condition the home and the condominium is left in, to be on the market and not have the fear of selling it in the marketplace. And to go back a little bit of the review of another Zoom I did earlier, we spoke about what really happened to pricing in certain areas in our country. And, the prices seem high. Well, with COVID, we saw a tremendous amount of permits and a lot of homes, condominiums, interior and bathrooms and kitchens, and homeowners, no matter what type of property it was, were renovating. They were home. So conditions and the expectation today for the pool of buyers that are out there is to turn the key, walk in, have your inspections, but do your due diligence as a buyer, and always hire a buyer agent and an attorney to review those kinds of things. If you're going for financing, make sure that the condominium association is in a condition that the lender that you speak with to do an application for your loan, that you have the inspection reports and things of that nature. So they can do a spot inspection or a spot approval, your lender, and those are important to know before you purchase as well. You can make the offer, but make it subject to these things. Call Jake, call your attorney. Those are the folks you really need to lean on during a transaction.
Awesome, thank you. I know we had some questions about that and kind of what's that list, so thank you. Outside of your own personal experience, do you have maybe just one quick example of buyers and where they were better off buying in a better maintained community, which meant higher fees?
Oh, there's several here on the Cape that had full envelopes done, and they have seen the equity positions in those situations increase drastically. It's not just the market, and it's not just the interest rates. It's all of those things that enter into what that condominium fee is going to be. That's part and parcel inclusive. When I see, as a real estate broker, a fee that is competitive in the marketplace and the place has been maintained, I can easily explain and get the documentation from the association management company that will look at that information and document that that property can be financeable. And that's very important for all sellers to make sure that their community is financeable. There are cash buyers out there and others that need to get the loan. So it all comes into play.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Let's transition to share with our audience, what we think you might not know Again, there's a couple of things on here, just being consistent with kind of board members' responsibility and then the types of buyers and what they're looking for. But question for you, Deb, from your experience, do higher fees associated with higher quality reduce demand, or does it shift the buying pool to buyers who prefer a higher quality home? A little bit of what Eric was talking about but from your perspective, what do you see?
I see that they want the higher quality property and they're willing to pay for it. And the lenders are wanting that as well. So when you look at a property and you have to look, you're doing it for yourself, your family, whatever property, why are you buying it? And then you're looking around and you're getting the feedback from your own family in many cases. But remember, there has to be a team aligned to make a successful transaction happen. I don't do anything without my attorney in any of it, or inspections. All of those things are very, very important. And a lot of times what I've also seen that will link to Jake a little bit, and the concern of the board members and the association's responsibility legally is to keep the property safe. And if they don't keep it safe, you're going to end up into some kind of litigation as well. So I've seen associations try to cut fees, and they think that that is their role, to cut fees or keep them low. It is not. Their responsibility is to make financial decisions that are difficult, but you make them for the whole entire community of the condominium complex. And that is something that's very important when you vote your own boards. Don't vote for popularity, vote for skill sets. And that's extremely important to have. And believe me, I'm sure in every community that I've spoken to, I have found a set of skilled owners within that community. And they will come forward and share their knowledge. And those are the folks that should be on the boards to help any kind of community through this. But I see the demand is more for the turnkey property, to answer your question, Shelby, earlier, all the way
Awesome.
through.
Thank you, Deb. That was some really good insight there. Okay, and then just to wrap us up here, the things that we want this audience to leave with, what you need to know. The final question for you, Deb, is if an inspector reports deferred maintenance or pending capital projects when completing a home inspection on behalf of the buyer, does that adversely impact pricing and the probability of closing?
Yes, it does. So if the inspector reports that there's deferred maintenance or sees things that are beyond what is in the management company's scope and skill set to repair, fix, then they're at risk of that transaction going forward. They fall through. It's called a fall through transaction. And it's sad when that happens, but I think, as Jake said earlier, it's extremely important. And to make everything in those buildings, walkways, decks are very important, as we saw, and that's another personal thing. We had a double deck on the back of my unit, and if they were ready to leave the building. They were on an exit strategy because our condition was so poor, and I'm so happy that our community chose to go forward with it. And there's nothing for sale in the community in which I still own in. We have a demand for buyers all around the community. We have family members of family members of family members that want to buy within that community. I myself have been offered a silly price, if you will, and it's generational for us there in our location, and we're just so happy that we now can turn the key and we don't have to worry about anything. We really don't. It's lovely.
Yeah, definitely that worry-free peace of mind.
Yeah,
Okay, great. Thank you, Deb, very, very much.
I hope that
Um,
helps.
Me as well. We're gonna move into another poll question similar to what we started this presentation with. Again, just to get another pulse after all of that information share. Where is everybody at before we go into our Q&A? Let me just launch that. Okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable are you with your current property values? 1 meaning our fees are restricting what we need to save or for the work that needs to be completed. And then the 10 on the opposite side being our fees are right sized and we're able to do what we need to keep property values where we want them. So far, we've got a pretty good mix. It seems like most people are falling right in the middle. So at a number 5, fees not quite where they need to be, but not super restrictive. I'll leave it just for a second. We've got 75% participation. Okay, that seems like the majority and nothing's changed much. It's all over, but most people landing right in the middle. Thank you for answering that for us as we officially transit. Oh, excuse me. Just a quick summary before we go into Q&A. What Jake discussed and covered, what Eric discussed and covered, and then just a summary of the handful of things that Deborah shared with us today.
Yeah. So from the legal perspective, you really want to make sure there's a holistic approach from the forefront. The big items are going to be structural integrity, looking into making sure that soundness and structure and safety of the property is in good shape, as well as what the shape of the deferred maintenance and any potential future structural integrity requirements needed in the future.
And from a planning perspective, a good plan that's proactive has a cost to it. And if there's a correlation between the condominium fee and the comprehensive nature of the plan, then our experience is that that's the right spot to be with respect to preserving or increasing your market value.
And again, I'll go back to the current condition. Only the homeowners and inspectors and the board will know that. And having the ability, and where is the pool of buyers? Is it a cash buyer? They want to turn the key and not have any worries whatsoever. And also anybody that needs to obtain the financial of any individual unit are also very, and should be posed to know that anything can go in an offer subject to, and make sure it's subject to an inspection beyond the condominium and all of the other common areas. So you have an idea that you can relay to your attorney like Jake or any attorney that you would hire to make sure that the condition and all of those equal to a successful transaction for you.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for all of that. So now we're going to officially transition into our Q&A. Thank you all for submitting your questions. It looks like we have a long list to get through. Like I said, we'll do our best to get through as many as we can, kind of focusing on those that might better our entire audience. If you have specific questions that we don't get to or that come up after this session, please feel free to reach out to our panelists. Their emails and their direct phone numbers are listed right here on this screen, so don't hesitate to do that. I'd like to kick us off with this question because all three of you spoke about it, but maybe Jake, you can start since you were the first. What do you mean by safe Can we just elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, so safe is a very it's a pretty vague and ambiguous in this instance. But safe is basically just addressing the structural integrity. That goes in the city of Boston, there's an ordinance that requires an inspection of the facade every 5 years. In Florida, where I practice as well, there is requirement as to by the end of this year, structural integrity by an engineer, a report. Basically signing off on the structural integrity of the property. And also there are also certain milestone inspections that are required. Those are 30, 40 years requirements. So making sure that all of those are pretty much addressed, making sure that if there's any construction defect litigation going on, making sure that the soundness and structure of the property is not basically creating an issue as to structural integrity. The biggest thing, and I mentioned this at the beginning, the backdrop of all of this, the Champlain Towers collapse, no one wants anything like that to ever happen again. So people are being a lot more careful. Lenders, banks, insurers, everyone is being a lot more careful. And all of these requirements or changes in some jurisdictions, I can foresee that it's going to be more regular in other jurisdictions to make its way throughout the nation. So what's happening, I see in Florida a lot that's required by the end of this year as far as structural integrity report by an engineer, that will most likely be commonplace throughout the country.
Yeah, and from my perspective, there's two elements of safety in a lot of the from our experience. One is deck safety, so either cantilever decks or elevated decks. Just ensuring that there's a structural integrity review of both. There's a little bit of common sense there where, especially with an elevated deck that has posts supporting it, if the posts aren't straight and in good condition, then just visually you can see a compromise to decks. There are communities where we show up with that those posts are bowed or at an angle, and that's a safety issue, especially for a second level or higher deck. The second is a little less obvious, but it's mold and mildew related items where water that is allowed to get into the wall cavity through exterior water where the walls are not watertight, which we see at a significant number of communities. Something you can't see, so you don't necessarily know that there's water in your wall cavity. It doesn't necessarily produce a leak to the interior of the home or a stain on your ceiling or wall. And it can be a place where mold and mildew can grow. So having a inspection to the wall cavities as part of either a reserve study or a more comprehensive inspection is really important from a safety perspective.
And my idea of safety, and thank you, Eric, because decks to me can be frightening. And I've seen some when you said, oh, you have a structural integrity issue. I've seen them completely off their footing, hanging underneath, and that's called deferred maintenance and a safety issue. Safety is extremely important in so many areas of structural properties. And I had an experience with a condominium association that they had lower level units, and those lower level units had windows and such like that. And a personal friend of mine had moved away from where her mom lived, and she said, "Can you just go check on my mom for me?" And I said, "Sure. Well, I'll go check on your mom. I've known her for years." Got in and offered her tea and what have you. And just as Eric had stated, mold. I went to help her in her bedroom, and in the window was some of the landscaping that wasn't taken care of, that was literally growing inside the window pane in her bedroom. She thought it kind of looked pretty, but with that came a lot of mold on the sheetrock and in back of that. And she was having a few health problems that were from her sleeping in that bedroom. That was remedied, but those are the things that are not safe. And, so decks and that. Safety is important.
Yes, agreed. Thank you all for giving your own insights from different perspectives on that. And I hope that was helpful and reached our entire audience. Next question, I think, is more directed for you, Jake. Is there any legal recourse that a current board can go back to past boards for lack of maintenance actions?
So here, I hate to give a lawyer answer, but it definitely depends on the circumstances. I would say yes, though. I'll need more details. For example, when did this happen? What are the maintenance issues at play here? The generic answer is yes, you can. And there's also ways that even unit owners can basically pursue a derivative action. And that's when a group of unit owners kind of go against a certain board or board members. But yeah, just the answer is yes. I'll need more details as to the specifics and what the maintenance issues were at play. But yeah, you have a right for recourse against prior infractions.
Thank you. I think that was a pretty clear answer.
Yeah, I said it depends, but the answer is yes.
Eric, I'd like to ask you this one. It's very common to have board members who are concerned about specific owners, especially elderly or senior citizens, that often guides the board members' decision making. Do you have any recommendations on how best to communicate with boards about their fiduciary responsibility? And maybe Jake, you might have something to add on here once Eric is finished.
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that we see a lot. Being a board member is difficult. You wear your fiduciary hat, where your responsibility is to care for the community and not really take into account specific personal situations of yourself or others. And you're a neighbor, and we can't just forget that. You're a neighbor in a community with people that hopefully care about one another and living together in a neighborhood. And so striking the balance between those two is something that is really important for all communities. We talked about community alignment in a previous webinar, and I think that's the focus here is, one, the community needs to respect the board's responsibility. Two, the board needs to be respectful of the specifics of the community that they've been elected to oversee and make decisions for, and that at the end of the day, the facts need to prevail. If something needs to be done, and the work that needs to be done has a cost, and that cost has a financial impact on owners, that's not avoidable. And so our recommendation is, one, get your facts first. Two, lead in terms of lead to your fiduciary responsibility. Three, be empathetic to the situation of the community. And four, and probably umbrella on top of that, is be transparent with the community as to what's going on and why those decisions are being made, so that people have visibility into your decisions and your decision-making process.
And it's important too, I agree with you, Eric and Jake, in our community, I forget how many buildings, 5 or more, we had a real disconnect with communications. And as a board member, we're like, how are we going to address that? Is it email? And there's, with technology, there's just so many different communication variances out there with age groups. And that needs to be addressed simultaneously. So what we chose to do is have an ambassador in every building. They know all their neighbors, knock on doors. They know who's parking beside them in the parking lots. They just know in each building. So that was very helpful for the community and for the community to understand why they had to make these difficult decisions. And it got the board to understand their fiduciary responsibilities, because it was then the whole entire community speaking to not just one issue on this end of the building or this unit or that unit. It was then all of a sudden the whole entire community. And it was a point in how do we communicate and how often. And when we were under construction, we communicated often and answered any question or concern that any owner had, whether they were on location, off location, and it was usually through the ambassador within the building that was kept up to par with all communications during the construction period.
Yeah, I'll just echo that transparency is so key with boards, but also as Eric and Deb mentioned, having some empathy and compassion for specific unit owners. You live in a community, you're buying into a community. It's important to empathize with what's going on with elderly, senior citizens, what have you, whatever's going on, whatever the situation may be. But transparency as well is just so key, and there's been a huge emphasis across best practices for community associations for boards to be more transparent with what's going on and into the decision making.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. Great answers. Next question, I think I'll start with Eric, just because you touched on it in your presentation. But do you think that if a property is well maintained and managed, that there should almost never be a need for a special assessment other than from unplanned catastrophic events or a force majeure?
Great question. The answer is yes. A well-maintained community and a good plan with right-sized fees could be intended. The intent of the plan is to avoid or reduce the probability of assessments. Then yes, that can be done. I think it's important to point out that there's an alternative, and different communities have different strategies on this front. And the alternative that I think is being referenced here sort of implicitly is that the assessment is a surprise. And so a good plan with proper fees, you can avoid surprise assessments. A planned assessment may be a perfectly sound alternate plan. So you might say, we're going to keep our fees at X level, and in 2028, we're going to assess the owners for Y amount, and we're going to let them know 4 years ahead of time, and then again 3 years and 2 years and 1 year, and so that the owners can plan. So as long as, go back to what Jake said, if there's transparency, there's merit, or there's, I'm not going to say one's better than the other, but there are different strategies for funding forecasted needs. And as long as that strategy is shared with the community and there's transparency on what the financial impact is going to be, then I think there's an argument that different approaches for different communities is a perfectly good approach.
Excellent. Jake and Deb, I feel like that was pretty succinct, but do you have anything to add?
No, I'm good.
Great answer, Eric.
Thanks.
Really well done.
Okay. This attendee is asking, we get a lot of pushback that people have to pay a small fee for amenities like pool and gym because their condo fees support a portion of the maintenance of those elements. Do any of you have experience with this, and perhaps a rationale for why they would need to pay into these maintenance funds? And maybe Eric, you can speak to that first.
Yeah, I didn't totally understand the question. Is the question that specifically a portion of the condominium fee is being allocated to the amenity?
Yes. And that there's a lot of pushback. So is there any rationale for kind of that like social dynamic and
Yeah.
understanding that those maintenance costs are there and it's a part of the fee?
So I think one thing that happens with communities is maybe you have a tennis court, a swimming pool, or a pickleball court, a weight room, and as owners in the community, you may choose or not to choose to use those amenities, and yet you're still paying for them. And I think Jake referred to this earlier. Part of joining a community is that you are joining all of the community, and all of the common property needs to be maintained, and whether you're specifically using it or not, having a portion of the fee that is clearly intended to maintain those common elements and those common amenities is not only that's fundamentally sound, and from the perspective of what the community was originally designed in terms of the providing those amenities, it makes sense.
And to add on to that, yeah, you might want to, as a board and as unit owners of the community, well, it's the board's discretion, but they'll need to look at the nature of the project first and figure out what the project is, whether it's a capital improvement or whether it's merely a repair. And then that will determine what's needed legally to get from point A to point B, and whether it's going to need a certain vote. But there's also certain things like a roof where a board needs to make a decision to repair it. And that'll be a little different than an improvement. So there's also that factor, and that's just that as far as the Massachusetts general law, there are certain parameters for each distinction.
It's interesting how you see the history of condominium communities, and there's so many that are different in regards. They start off with, I mean, many are, might have a golf community, and that needs to be supported. There may have a clubhouse that needs to be supported. And with that clubhouse, there's a pool, there's the exercise room and those things. And I've seen communities stay private with that. And if they stay private with their amenities, then the community's only choice is to pay to play, whether you use them or not. And what I have seen other larger communities that have amenities like that go outside of the private aspect of the community and make it more public to the local area. And that has saved many communities that are large that have amenities. My amenities for where I have mine that I spoke about earlier has the clubhouse, has a food minimum, has an indoor pool, has an outdoor pool. And I remember being that member that said, there's no way we're paying for an elevator. Okay, but And why do we need the indoor pool? We have an outdoor pool. Well, my daughter was the first one with physical therapy to have to use the indoor pool that we ended up paying for. But as a community on that board at that level with those amenities, what we chose to do was to make our community, and everybody in the community that owns has to belong then to the amenities of the community. And then you share them and you share the expense. And that was our success, because that community, from the time it was developed, and it had 3 bankruptcies in the clubhouse arena because of those amenity expenses. So the boards can make other decisions and choices depending on what the arrangement is. It's a long change, but those are positive changes you can try to adopt within your community if it fits Not, it's not a one size fits all solution. So
Yes.
hopefully that helps.
Thanks. Thank you for adding that, Deb. I think really valuable here. We have a question I'm sure all of you can touch on, and we're in our final few minutes here, so maybe this one and one more. Let's see how this one goes. There seems to be a disconnect between what the fee is set at by the builder when the community is first developed and what the fee actually needs to be to maintain that community. So do you have any insight on, why the fees are set so low to begin with? Eric, you're nodding your head. You might want to go
Yeah, a
first.
little bit. Well, we have some insight there. We work with some newer communities. What tends to happen is and this is kind of speaks to exactly what the point we're talking about today, albeit counter to the point that we're making with younger communities. In order to stimulate sales, what we will see is developers setting the condominium fee low, sort of at a market rate that's independent of what the community needs for the long term. And so when the community is young, a low fee that's maybe disproportionately weighted just to the operating expenses, so just the known expenses that come up every single year, versus reserving for future capital expenses, that works in a new community because there are no future capital expenses for a while. Those expenses tend to show up maybe 10, 15, 20 years down the road. So there's a whole school of thought of why save a whole bunch of money for something that's not going to happen until 10, 15, 20 years. Going back to my previous answer, that's fine as long as that it's disclosed and shared with the community. You say, here's a lower fee, and eventually we're going to run into a major assessment. Once there's transparency with the community, I think you can then introduce an alternative to the way that the community was launched, which is one of two things: either raise the fees so you have a planned a planned approach that ensures you have enough money when an expense happens, or identify those future dates when those expenses are going to happen and keep the community informed as to the need to raise money for those events when they happen.
I would add that when it goes from developer owned to unit owner owned or unit owner controlled, that's the beginning of the timeline for the unit owners and the board and the new board. There should be some events that occur right after turnover, such as a transition study, a transition report as to the current structure and what to expect in the future. Also, down the road, and this is kind of touching on, as you kind of stabilize and you're running smoothly and operations are more smoothly and it's unit owner controlled, there is some hesitance to contributing towards a reserve fund. I think now that the statute is changing more towards, for example, in Massachusetts, the language says adequate reserves. Adequate is a term of art. It doesn't really, it doesn't specify an amount. In Florida, for example, it's a 10% of the budget. So I think that's where we're heading towards, more concrete examples of investing in the reserves, even if it's something that is not a direct investment on something that you can see. It's something for the future, but it's something that, as we saw with Surfside, is needed, and you should be investing in it, and it's for the betterment of the community.
Yeah. Deb, do you have anything to add on to that?
That and Eric, the answer to that I think was spot on. So I don't have anything to add to it, but very well done, gentlemen.
Thank you. Okay, just to respect everyone's time, we are at the 2:00 mark. So I want to leave everybody and conclude there. Like I said, please reach out individually to our panelists if you have any questions that we didn't answer, or some that may have come up when they were answering others' questions. Thank you all so much for choosing to spend your precious and valuable time with us today. This represents a true commitment to the communities you serve, and we are honored to be a part of that. So thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.